with Greg Olsen potentially breaking a foot? You think that that's not going to be, a pivotal part of their offense moving forward if he misses some significant games?
Oh, that's a big loss. No doubt that is a big loss. But okay, when you talk about year to year, so you lose Greg Olsen, and you can't minimize that. I mean, this guy has just been quite a security blanket for Cam Newton. So now you hope that Cam Newton can reestablish his connection with Kelvin Benjamin, who was so good but missed the Super Bowl and came back last year. Maybe he'll take another step. And then the weapon that I am so intrigued about is Christian McCaffrey, the rookie from Stanford. So maybe you kind of mitigate the loss of Olsen, and thank goodness for the Carolina Panthers, it's not a season-ending injury. They're expecting it'll be something that'll keep him out for maybe 6 weeks or so. But you've got a chance now to really kind of establish another dimension of your offense with McCaffrey in conjunction still in the backfield with Jonathan Stewart. But McCaffrey gives you something in the passing game that you haven't really had from the running backs at Carolina during this era with Cam Newton. So maybe that'll be one area where they can make up for the loss of Greg Olsen. But he is a huge loss.
Moving to the Super Bowl winners after their loss against Kansas City, what did you learn and what were you impressed with most? There were so many things to be impressed with the Patriots.
Well, you know what? I'm going to pump the brakes on that just a little bit. I mean, it was good to see Tom Brady.
So it wasn't impressive?
Pardon me?
It was not an impressive win?
No. He was impressive. No doubt about that. It's Tom Brady, the 40-year-old maestro, okay, looking sharp, coming out, and he was ticked off all week. Belichick, they had 10 days to stew over that loss against Kansas City. Yeah. So that's kind of their MO. They don't lose very many games after they lose again. They don't have very many losing streaks. But here's the reason why I say pump the brakes on it just a bit. They were playing the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints defense is just really atrocious right now. And they've got 4 rookies starting. They got lit up last in week 1 by Sam Bradford. That was a tough task for the Saints defense. So I don't know if the Patriots had as tough of a test as they're going to have moving forward, at least from defense. And then New England's defense is still a big question mark in my mind. I mean, they were up without Dante Hightower. I like what they have in the secondary on the back end, but there are still a lot of questions about how tough they'll be with their front seven, and especially with Hightower being hurt, that's got to be a concern moving forward. I mean, he'll get back eventually, so it's a week-to-week type of injury for them, but that's kind of one of their challenges. But here's the thing: everybody has challenges, right? And the Patriots do as well of a job as anybody, probably better than anybody when it comes to adjusting to your situation. So I think that has to be something you have to be impressed with New England. I mean, they didn't have Danny Amendola. They went into the season light on receiver depth, okay? So now they've got to find some different ways to work some things. And one of the things they did yesterday that we've seen we saw before in the Super Bowl, actually, was the fact that James White, the running back, can be such a weapon in the passing game. So, Tom Brady was Tom Brady, so that's impressive. But, again, it was against the New Orleans Saints, so we'll see.
So talk about the expectations now and what worried you. Expectations high for the Cowboys this year, especially since now it's come in that Zeke is going to be playing all year. What worried you about that game?
Well, we still don't know if Zeke Elliott is going to be there for the whole year. Now, you can assume that because when you think back to what happened with Tom Brady when he fought the NFL and went to court, he ended up serving his 4-game suspension, but it was a year later than the NFL wanted him to serve it. So the NFL has really kind of, taken a little bit of a different approach. They have, gone to the court, to the Court of Appeals, and pretty much said, hey, we want to get this thing expedited so that if there is a suspension that they expect will be upheld because the labor agreement kind of gives them the power. So we'll see if that sticks again in the case of Elliott. But, the NFL's position on this is that, hey, we want to try to get the suspension served this season. So they're not going to give up the fight and say, oh, it's just going to go into next year. And that could really hurt the Cowboys if the case gets expedited and Elliott still has to serve that 6-game suspension, and it comes in, say, November, December, or we start talking about playoffs. So that's still a situation to keep an eye on if you're, a Cowboys fan. But in terms of what happened yesterday with Elliott on the field, boy, that would have been a game for him to be suspended, right? Because he didn't have much going on yesterday against the Broncos. And, that's the first time that has really happened with the Cowboys with this formula with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, they were so good last year. The games that they lost last year were tight games to the Giants twice, and then they lost the finale at Philly, and then they lost in the playoffs to the Packers. But all of those games were tight. And throw out
for
the
Zeke
Philadelphia
too,
game.
right? Since even his time going back to Ohio State, this was one of the probably worst games of his career.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know what? Even worse than that was the criticism that came out of it. LaDainian Tomlinson, the Hall of Fame running back, he really blasted Elliott after the game, saying that he quit on his team, particularly in a play where he didn't chase down an interception. So when you hear stuff like that, you wonder, oh boy,
what do you think?
Is this something that can be even a bigger problem moving forward?
Do you think he quit on his team?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd go that far because it's a long game with a lot of plays and a lot of situations. But on that one interception that is kind of the highlight to make that point, you could say, what did he not give a full effort? But in terms of the game overall, I don't know if I'd say that he quit on him, but nothing was working. And it's not always on Ezekiel Elliott because you have the offensive line that creates the holes for him. So, there's a shared responsibility there. So did he quit on him overall? I wouldn't say that, but, it's definitely some Monday morning controversy for the Cowboys to deal with that they haven't had to deal with in this regard since they've had Elliott and Dak Prescott.
Speaking of nothing working, what about that Cowboys defense, JB? What do you think about that? Do you think that can get shored up through the course of this year?
Hey, you know what? We knew going into this season, Trista, that there were going to be questions about the Cowboys